This is a really good question. If Let It Be was mostly ready by the time it was shelved, then why was it shelved in the first place? First of all, I think it's important we understand that mostly finished is not the same thing as fully finished. When I say that the original version of the album produced by George Martin was pretty much done, I don't really mean something like the Let It Be naked version of the album. We have to remember that this was supposed to be a live album, so no editing, no overdubs, and no mixing. Those were the rules George Martin had to follow. But when the time came to listen to the final version of the songs, the boys, and especially John Lennon, were not happy with the result. It was too rugged, rough, and raw. This, along with the fact that recording the album was problematic to say the least. Yoko was constantly in the studio, John was abusing the hell out of heroin, and George and Paul were constantly fighting. This is usually where people get it wrong, because a lot of people seem to believe that the boys shelved the album, and then a few weeks later they came up with the idea for Abbey Road, but it was actually the other way around. Even if they didn't like the result, they had to finish the album, and they knew that. There was a whole film made about it, so it had to be released. However, they also had a bunch of songs they had to discard because it didn't fit the concept of the live album Let It Be was supposed to be. So instead of going back in the studio to fix Let It Be, they focused on those other songs to make a new project, a new album. In other words, it's not like they abandoned the album. They knew they had to finish it. And after Abbey Road was released, even though John Lennon had already left the band, they called in Phil Spector to try and patch up the album as much as possible, creating the final version of Let It Be, released in May of 1970.